Hey everybody, today is the 3rd of February 2025. Welcome again to a short video courtesy of investingsuccess.ca. This video is a continuation of the one that I posted recently talking about George Bayer, the man of mystery. Recall from the first video that Mr. Bayer was a German immigrant, arrived in the US around 1899. He came armed with a knowledge base of the planetary cosmos, second to none. He was very dialed into things like planetary declination, retrograde, very dialed into the fact that as planets orbited the sun, there would be a time when they were relatively close to the sun, relatively far away. And he used these actual phenomenon to help him trade the markets over something like 4 decades. Made a comfortable living, and prior to his retiring and going away, he wrote a series of books. And he was very kind enough to share his knowledge and document it for future generations. He was also very kind to document something like 60 trading rules. And I've looked at all of these rules, and there's a number of them that I do use. And, they worked for him back in the day, and they still work to this day. And I'm going to show you one of them right now. Now, before I jump into the rule I want to show you today, I want you to look at this diagram. The yellow object is the sun. The red object is a planet. It orbits around the sun not in a perfectly circular pattern, but rather in a slightly oblong shape, which means that there will be a time in its orbit when it is relatively close to the sun, and there will be a time when it's relatively far away. The time when it is closer to the sun is called perihelion. The time when it is farther away is called aphelion. Now, Mr. Bayer laid down what he called rule number 7, and he said, with respect to the planet Mars, determine its perihelion and its aphelion points. Now, these would be the points as we see the planet Mars from our vantage point here on Earth. Where would he have got that data back in his day? Probably from a publication put out by maybe the British Naval Observatory or maybe the US Naval Observatory. Today, I don't have to go to that extent. I just go to the NASA website, and with a few clicks of my mouse, I can get the data I'm looking for. Now, the NASA website, it says that Mars will be at aphelion when we see Mars at 156 degrees on the zodiac. It will be at perihelion when we see it at 336 degrees on the zodiac. So the question then is, we just have to figure out what dates it will pass those degree points. And you can find that out in your ephemeris. Just look forward in time and you'll see. So Bayer said, all right, if you know those dates, if you know those times, you just have to watch the price chart because something's likely to happen on those dates. Let me show you a couple examples. Here's a chart of wheat. Left-hand side of the chart, you'll see that I've got a notation Mars at 156 degrees. That denotes Mars at aphelion. Did something happen to the price of wheat when Mars was aphelion? Yeah, it did. The price of wheat fell out of bed. Absolutely collapsed. Went from over $7.70 a bushel down to several months later probing $5.30 a bushel. So to the person following Bayer's rules, the price of wheat was rising in the summer of 2023. It would have been very tempting for someone to just keep adding to their positions. I mean, what could go wrong? The price of wheat is heading high, and there's no stopping it. But rule number 7 says something is likely to happen because you have this Mars aphelion event bearing down on you. Another example, over towards the right-hand side of the chart, you'll see that I have a notation, Mars at 336. Well, that's perihelion. What happened? Well, take a look. In March of 2024, the price of wheat, it's still probing that low level around $5.30 a bushel. It decides it's going to have a little rally. Now, it would have been very tempting to jump on board And it would have been very tempting to just say to yourself, this thing is going to go way higher and I'm going to just hang on for the ride. But Bayer's rule said be careful because you've got a Mars perihelion event bearing down on you and something's likely to happen. And did it happen? Sure. Take a look at the chart where I've got this red group of dates circled here. And the trend changed. It pulled back. And I'm sure that it caught a lot of people off guard who had taken long positions on wheat futures. And then no sooner had the market flushed all of those guys out and sent them home, it took off again. So rule number 7, absolutely pay attention to it. And you've got your ephemeris tables in front of you. You can easily see in advance when these Mars events are going to occur. Here's a chart of NVIDIA, everybody's favorite chip maker. Here is March of 2024. You've got Mercury at perihelion. NVIDIA is around $90 a share at the time. Now, Bayer says, trend change, potentially. Well, look at what NVIDIA had been doing in early 2024, $60 a share. It rises, has a little volatility, but it just keeps chugging along and making new highs. So you get to the latter part of March 2024, everybody's talking about this thing, the Mag 7. Every second person appearing on the financial talk shows is talking about NVIDIA. That's all we hear about, the AI revolution. Well, George Bayer's rule says, be careful. You've got Mars at a perihelion event, something's likely to happen. And it did. And the stochastic actually showed you that something was happening. It rolled over. And it caught a lot of people off guard. And it went from 90 down to 76. And so people were probably thinking, Mag 7, what's this all about? How come this went down? It's not supposed to do that. Well, the planets are in control, not the financial media, not the analysts. The planets are in control. Now, there's a secondary component to rule number 7. And it says, look at the planet Venus. Identify its perihelion and aphelion points. NASA website says that from our vantage point here on Earth, we will know that Venus is at aphelion when we see it in the zodiac at 311 degrees. We will know that it is at perihelion when we see it in the zodiac at 131 degrees. And those numbers cited by NASA, yep, they agree with what George Bayer cited when he wrote down these rules in the late 1930s. So then the question is, you know the degree points. Look forward in your ephemeris table and just make a note of the dates when Venus is going to pass those degree points. And keep a note of those dates and watch the price chart for the stock, the commodity, the index, whatever it is you're following. And when Venus is at aphelion or perihelion, Bayer says, look for something to happen. Let's have an example. Tesla. Venus is at aphelion at 311. It's at perihelion at 131. So, May of 2023, the price of Tesla starts climbing higher. And a lot of people are looking at it and probably thinking, wow, this thing is really on fire. It's going to go dramatically higher. Well, no, Bayer's rule number 7 says that you have to first navigate this Venus perihelion event. And look what happened. Just as Venus is at perihelion, the uptrend runs into a pocket of volatility. And ultimately it did press a little bit higher, but then it collapsed and the price retreated remarkably. So Bayer says you've got to watch what happens around these dates because things could go a little sideways for you and you could get caught. February 2024, Venus is at aphelion. Now, what had been going on? Well, starting in January 2024, Tesla started going down. And at one point, it even made a gap. Then it decided it's going to have a little counter trend rally. And I'm sure a lot of people watching thought, you know what? this thing is going to get back on track. We're going to make some new highs here. It's part of the Mag 7, don't you know? Well, rule number 7 had a different opinion. Venus basically pulled the rug out from under it, and it sent Tesla down, and it actually took out the lows that it had made in April of 2023. So not good. But then Tesla got back on track, and it picked itself up, and people started to buy into it again. And it had a rally which lasted through, June and into July. And then you had perihelion, and look what happened. The uptrend that had taken it through June into July all of a sudden hits a pocket of turbulence because human emotion is getting disturbed with the planet Venus making this critical point in its orbital journey around the sun. And what did the price of Tesla do? Fell apart. It gave back practically all of its gains. And then it got itself together and it picked itself up, and the whole Mag 7 theme came to the fore again, and off we went like a scared rabbit, heading higher. Look what happened at the end of 2024. Venus is at aphelion, 311 degrees. People are saying that 2025 is going to be a remarkable year, and these Mag 7 stocks are going to continue, and we're into this AI revolution, and what could possibly go wrong? Well, Venus could possibly go wrong because when it passed aphelion, look what happened to this uptrend on Tesla. It just got cut off at the knees. And the price of Tesla pulled back rather dramatically, and I'm sure it caught a lot of people off guard. So there is a lot of wisdom then in paying attention to George Bayer's rule number 7. NVIDIA. We've got Venus at 131 degrees, and that's in July of 2024. So that's your perihelion. And we can see that in July of 2024, the price of NVIDIA kind of hit an interim high. It started to roll over. The stochastic told you it was rolling over. And it gapped down at one point, but then it had a little counter trend rally. So people are thinking, wow, dodge that one. And this counter trend rally is probably going to, take it much higher again because it's NVIDIA. It's an AI story. What could possibly go wrong? No, Bayer says you got to watch these aphelion and perihelion events. So here it is, 131 degrees for Venus. What does it do? The counter trend rally completely fails. The stock completely falls out of bed, and it gives back something like $33. And it scared away a lot of people, I'm certain. But then it picked itself up and it pushed higher. So, there's a prime example of the risk involved in buying these stocks that everybody is talking about. Use Bayer's rule number 7, and it can keep your head screwed on, it can keep your feet on the ground, and it can keep you focused. End of the year, Venus at 311, aphelion. Price of NVIDIA had been coming down, counter trend rally into early December, came down again into the middle part of December. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people were thinking, you know what, maybe this thing is not what it's cracked up to be. Maybe it's just going to keep drifting lower. No. Bayer's rule number 7 says pay attention. Something could possibly happen. There it is, right at its aphelion occurrence. The downtrend suddenly puts the brakes on. Human emotion suddenly changes, and people are now buying NVIDIA and pushing it and retesting those old highs. So if you use rule number 7 in conjunction with something like a stochastic, you know what? It can add a whole new complexion to a stock, a commodity, or an index. So thank you, George Bayer, and thank you for rule number 7. All right, that's it for me for this short little video. I do encourage you to start using this rule. If you've got an ephemeris table at home, or you can get one online, you know the positions of the planets. You can look ahead in time and figure out when Mars and Venus are at aphelion and perihelion, and watch the trend going into these events and watch for potential changes in the trend. You can find me, as always, at investingsuccess.ca. I've got the astrology letter. Thank you for watching me on Substack. I'm going to be going on holidays in February for a bit. I'm going to do a second edition of The Lost Science. That was the second ever book that I published 10 years ago. A lot of water has flown under the bridge in 10 years. Let me be very clear about that. So there's a lot of new knowledge that I'm going to fold into the second edition of The Lost Science. Alrighty, thank you kindly for watching. Now you've got Bayer's rule number 7. Have fun with it. It does work, and I do encourage you to make it part of your trading toolkit. Have a great day. Thank you.